today it's a big honor and pleasure to have with us Professor Holmes, professor from the University College de Londres in the UK. And Professor Holmes received his PhD in education from the University of Oxford, also in the UK, and he has several degrees, among which it's worth mentioning that he has degrees in films and philosophy, and also, of course, in education. And the reason why we wanted to invite Professor Holmes to have this dialogue with us today was that because his research interests are in the area of artificial intelligence, and in particular the application of artificial intelligence in education. And he has conducted extensive research on how technology, in this case artificial intelligence, could be used to reimagine the teaching and the learning that we do at universities. And as all of you know, within the iNNoVaNDiS program, the program that we have within the university to train students on innovation and entrepreneurship, we are also strong believers in that innovation is necessary also in educational context, among many other fields, of course. So we'd like to hear a little bit, what are you working on at the moment in this regard? What are the latest projects that you are developing in this field at the moment?
Well, firstly, thank you very much for inviting me, and also thank you for allowing me to speak in English. I'm a typical Englishman and can only speak English. The work that I'm involved in is what I refer to as a critical studies approach to artificial intelligence in education. This is because I'm not a computer scientist at all. I can't create artificial intelligence, but I'm starting from the perspective that AI, whether we like it or not, is fast encroaching on the education space, from kindergarten right the way up to university. And so the area I'm interested in is what does this mean? How do we get beneath the hyperbole? How do we break apart the myths? How do we understand exactly what is happening and what are the implications for teaching and learning? From the ethical implications are the most obvious, but what about the practical and innovation implications as well? Is the introduction of AI into classrooms really the advance that the AI commercial sector would have us believe?
Okay. Yeah, and just following what you just said, as you have mentioned earlier in your first intervention, you have been approaching the changes that artificial intelligence may bring to educational institutions from a critical perspective. And one of the changes we may say that educational institutions are facing at the moment is that we universities tend to be very stable institutions, let's say, while situations like the pandemic, but also the fast speed or high velocity environments in which we are living, they require all the types of abilities and all type of speed, all the type of adaptive skills from universities, when in turn we are very slow movers. So in this regard, we observe from our program that societal actors have become a little bit more skeptic on what educational institutions do, because they are not able to find the responses that they may eventually were able to find in previous decades from educational institutions. And this is why we see a little bit that educational institutions are losing grip as compared to what societal actors, either public or private, need. So do you think that artificial intelligence may help to close this gap so that society in general, broadly speaking, or private actors or public actors may come back to the university searching for solutions to their societal problems or for their own needs? Do you think that AI may help to close this gap?
I'm not convinced that AI in itself will help to close that, but I think these kind of conversations will help. Mm-hmm. I think, I agree with you that the expert, if you like, has been undermined in recent decades. And I think one of the few benefits, if you can call it a benefit, from the pandemic has that people been going back to and wanting expertise and realizing the value of expertise. And I think that's really important. The AI tools themselves and the AI approaches, I'm not convinced they're going to help that, to be honest. because I think the assumption that the AI is capable of doing things without expertise is growing by the day. But people forget the huge role that humans play in the development of AI. So we know that the most recent version of AI, machine learning, or the version that's had the most impact in recent years, we kind of have the feeling that there's AI is out there, it does stuff on its own, but it doesn't. It needs people to set what are the questions that we're looking into. It needs people to identify the data. It needs people to clean the data. It needs people to design the algorithms and use the algorithms on the data. It then needs humans to curate the outputs. And also, and this to me is where it gets really critical, it needs humans to apply the human values that you've mentioned to the outputs. So, like in any statistical output, it's long been said that there's statistics and there's lies. And AI is just a very sophisticated version of that looks like it is intelligent, but probably isn't intelligent at all. And so what is really important is the way in which we as humans interact. And we can ask the right questions. AI can't ask the questions. And then when we get the answers that the AI provides, we have to interpret those answers. We cannot rely upon them. We have examples of from the US that use algorithms to determine how long somebody who's been convicted of a crime should stay in prison. But we know that that's profoundly unfair to certain parts of the demographic. So the AI in itself is not going to achieve anything. And in many ways, I think it can undo a lot of the good that has happened. But if we as humans, as experts in universities in particular, but humans, citizens more generally, if we are able to continue to take that critical approach, that critical attitude to what these systems are doing, then possibly.
So then from that perspective, this reflection was very interesting. So from that perspective, what would be the added value of universities? In which areas do you think that a university or educational institutions could provide a relative comparative advantage as compared to what technologies could do for us? So which are those areas that technology would not be able to do? In this case, artificial intelligence. And therefore we humans that we could actually rather focus upon, because we would be better than the machines making this type of educations in our context.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things is to think about what we are teaching. Now, for too long, lots of education has focused on transmission of knowledge. The teacher, the professor, I have my knowledge and I will now share it with the students. We've long known that that's a waste of effort, and it's not a very intelligent way to use our students' time. And most of us don't do that, in fact. But the tools, the AI tools, two aspects. One is that is what they do, the current versions. And two, we have to recognize, well, AI is actually pretty good at shuffling bits of knowledge around. So why are we teaching our students knowledge? Instead, and I suspect this is what you do in your program, we should be teaching our students how to use knowledge, how to access knowledge, how to critique knowledge, how to connect bits of knowledge in innovative ways. Well, those are all the things that the AI can't do. So let the AI do what it can do, and we should focus as humans on what we should be doing and can do far better than any AI system.
Yeah, and to conclude, one of the things that you have mentioned in couple of times during the conversation was the word values. And indeed, not only for us within university context that we provide values, and we need to show values, the relevance of values to our students, but also for those who are programming AI. And because AI has to be programmed by someone, and that someone will have certain values. So it's important that the person who is going to develop the code for that system or that technology to actually operate, it has the values that the society needs. And then one of the things that we struggle, I guess this is also the case for you at the UCL, is that at the university context or educational context in general, we struggle, I would say, daily in a sense of how do you put weight, how do you assess the relevance or the right values and the right attitudes on the students. So what is a right value? What is a right attitude? They are very subjective by nature to a great extent. So we encounter many difficulties and barriers in the sense of how do you put a grade in the end of the day to the student for having certain values, because it's very clear if you know a theoretical content, you know it or you don't. But in the case of the values, it's much more subjective, and it's up to the application, as you indicated. It's the application of the learning that you have conducted, and that application has to be ethical or has to imply certain values towards society. So would you have any suggestion on how to do this assessment of the values or the ethical attitudes or the behavior that we want these students to bring to society? Have you encountered any experience in which this was the case?
I think there isn't a lot of experience in this in the way that you're describing. I think that, as you say, the problem is, you use the word subjective, but it's also political. It's hugely political. And the AI community have been engaging with concepts of fairness, for example.
Yeah.
And the problem is that, what do you mean by fairness? One of the researchers has identified 27 different types of fairness before you begin to actually think, how do we address those 27 different types? And as you point out, how I address it might be very different to somebody in QAnon in the States, for example, might address the same thing.
Yeah, even the role of culture. How culture is different across countries. Something that is considered ethical in the UK, maybe it's not in Spain or vice versa.
Exactly. And, particularly between East and West, the Far East and the different philosophical backgrounds that they have. So, one of the benefits, I think, of countries coming together into larger groupings is that this thing gets thrashed out. These discussions. Yeah. So I think that one way it could happen is we could just bottle me and just everybody has to take my values, which obviously I would like, but maybe others might disagree with. I think at the end of the day, though, it comes down to the same thing with the knowledge transition thing, is that it's not about teaching the right values, because the right values are debatable, but it's about empowering students to understand and to be able to question values and to be able to understand when values are being compromised, and to understand that values come out of negotiation and they differ from country to culture. So I think that's what it's about. It's about providing the students with those skills so they can engage with the value in productive ways. I can't think of any AI tools that help with that program.
Yeah, that can help with that.
But maybe that's an interesting future project.
So, once again, Professor Holmes, thank you very much. It's been, one could continue having this conversation for ages, but I said at the very beginning, we don't want to take more of your valuable time. So it's been a big pleasure to have this conversation with you. We invite our students and the people who are eventually watching this conversation with Professor Holmes to browse on the internet, find the things that he has been not only publishing in academic language, but also in societal, and he's very active into this dissemination of knowledge. You can find lots of information out there on the debates that he was referring to during the conversation. So we strongly advise you to have a look at those, because we believe that they will bring you to some reflections. And as usual, if you have this type of reflections, please don't hesitate to contact us, and we'll be more than willing to deal with them within the program.
Thank you very much. It's been a joy to speak with you, and I wish you a happy time as well. And I very much look forward to continuing the conversation.
Yeah, thank you very much, Wayne. And if you ever come to San Sebastian, please don't hesitate to let us know. It will be a big pleasure to have you for real at the university.
Thank you very much.